sports team in season, especially her New England Patriots. Everybody, let's give it up for Carolyn.
Well, speaking of the 6-time Super Bowl champion New England Patriots, there we are. I love the reactions. I can think of a few times in the last few years where they lost a game that they absolutely should have won. Any other sports fans relate to that experience where you're like hyped for the game? You're like, we're gonna dominate this team, only to walk away completely disappointed, frustrated, and honestly just embarrassed that they somehow lost that game. Like, what happened? On paper, they are the better team. They have more skill and they're more qualified, but when it came time to play, they just did not show up. I think they got too comfortable. They made assumptions about their opponent. They made assumptions about the outcome of the game before it had even started. And there are a few things in my life that get me as worked up as my team failing to show up as the team that I know that they can be and should be. Like, how do we lose to the Jets? Come on. But as I reflected and prayed about what I wanted to share today, I had this sense of urgency to talk about the significance and the importance of how we show up to live our lives. A reading from Matthew 24, starting in verse 37. When the Son of Man returns, it will be like it was in Noah's day. In those days before the flood, the people were enjoying banquets and parties, weddings right up to the time Noah entered his boat. People didn't realize what was going to happen until the flood came and swept them all away. That is the way it will be when the Son of Man comes. Skipping to verse 42. So you too must keep watch, for you don't know what day your Lord is coming. Understand this, if a homeowner knew exactly when a burglar was coming, he would keep watch and not permit his house to be broken into. You also must be ready all the time, for the Son of Man will come when least expected. That might not be the verse you were expecting me to segue into from the Patriots, but this isn't exactly an end times message per se, but it's also not an end times message. I am, however, asking the question, are we living ready? Whether or not the return of Christ happens in our lifetime, we will all stand before him at some point. And the reality is that none of us know when that will be. The passage we just read continues into verse 48, making an example of a servant who, assuming he had more time before his master returned, lived a wicked life. And while we may not be out living what we would deem wicked lives, I'm asking the question, are we living like we have more time? Are we incorrectly assuming? Am I too comfortable with today because I think I still have tomorrow? I imagine that most of us live with goals that have some kind of long-term payout, whether that's saving to buy a house or your retirement accounts or investing in your education. We have fitness goals for longevity. In some way, at least, we are preparing today for something we want tomorrow. But are we doing the same thing spiritually? Of all the things that we prepare for in life, the return of Christ or our standing before him should be of highest priority. Now, I am not suggesting that we over-spiritualize all of our life's activities, put everything in a nice spiritual box, because there really is so much to be enjoyed and delighted in this life. But I do think that if we are not careful, it would be easy for us to find ourselves spiritually asleep, sleepwalking, going through the motions. In the passage in Matthew, people in Noah's day, they were partying, they were having a good time, we just heard, until it started raining. Their spiritual eyes were so dim that they could not see what was coming. The thing is that the enemy of our lives could not care less if we live fun, happy, prosperous, healthy lives if we otherwise miss the life that God has been inviting us into. Are we underestimating the work of our opponent in our life? When we get caught up in this life and set aside or deprioritize the activities that cultivate our spiritual growth, the eyes of our heart can grow dim. Our ability to hear God's voice, discern the times, and to operate fully in the authority and the gifts that he's given us becomes increasingly more difficult. And when we live like we have more time, not only do we hurt our own souls, but we do a disservice to the people around us. We're telling those that we're otherwise called to reach that they can wait. When we set a goal to run a marathon, but we consistently say day after day, I'll start training tomorrow, we're never gonna run that marathon. Let's not be this way with our spiritual lives, because the truth is we just don't know when we're gonna run out of time. 1 Peter 5:8 says, "Stay alert. Watch out for your great enemy, the devil. He prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour." Here, Peter is specifically talking about enduring persecution, but our enemy is honestly looking for any way to keep us from God and the life he's called us to. C.S. Lewis's Screwtape letters has been referenced a few times from this stage in the past, but if you're unfamiliar, it's a book written as a series of letters exchanged between a demon and his nephew as they talk about the ways in which they interfere in the lives of humans, and I wanted to share this quote. The Christians describe the enemy, God in this case, as one without whom nothing, capital N, is strong. And nothing is very strong. Strong enough to steal away a man's best years, not in sweet sins, but in a dreary flickering of the mind over it knows not what and knows not why, in the gratification of curiosities so feeble that the man is only half aware of them, in drumming of fingers and kicking of heels and whistling tunes that he does not like, or in the long dim labyrinth of reveries that have not even lust or ambition to give them a relish, but which, once chance association has started them, the creature is too weak and fuddled to shake off. You will say that these are very small sins, and doubtless, like all young tempters, you are anxious to be able to report spectacular wickedness. But do remember, the only thing that matters is the extent to which you separate the man from the enemy. It does not matter how small the sins are, provided that their cumulative effect is to edge the man away from the light and out into the nothing. We live in a culture of distraction and desensitization. And we may not be out engaging in overtly or even subtly sinful activities, but how many hours can we lose in the nothingness? And it's not just the nothingness that poses a threat to our souls, it's busyness, hustle culture, our obsession with self-help and personal growth. And I know many of you have kids whose activities fill your calendar to the brim. And these are not bad things, these are mostly good things. But we've got to keep watch over our hearts, our souls, and live with our eyes wide open. In that passage in Screwtape letters, you hear about the enemy's scheme to catch us up in the nothingness, enough to keep us away from God, on the sidelines, out of the game. In Matthew, we read about people who were living good lives, fun lives, just watching Noah spend his whole life building an ark with no idea of what was coming. And then there was another man who goes to bed thinking his home is safe, only to wake up the next morning and realize he's been robbed. And still another unfaithful servant lives irresponsibly, incorrectly believing he has more time. These people did not live ready or aware. They missed it and were ultimately devoured. Now, the heart of this message is not meant to stir up fear or anxiety about possibly missing the rapture. It's not a charge to straighten up your life and, walk the straight and narrow. I'm not asking, if you died today, do you know where you'd be? This isn't so much about ensuring your salvation as much as I hope that this would be an invitation to live out the life that God is calling us to live here on the earth while we still have time, for our sake and for the sake of others. I believe that there is so much more for us. It's not just about getting by or pursuing the American dream. I don't want us to miss out on the real life that we're meant to live, walking in the fullness of God and our identity in Him. The scriptures tell us that there is an invitation for us to take an active role in bringing the kingdom of heaven to earth. There's an invitation to experience more of Christ in the fullness of His presence. We're charged with the task of making disciples. We're urged to put on the armor of God for this unseen battle in which we live. We're taught that the Holy Spirit resides within us, empowering us with spiritual gifts and authority. But are we taking this seriously? Are we taking God up on these invitations and truly living a life worthy of our call, as Paul says in Ephesians 4? I think that we all know that these are critical days that we're living in. These days require us to live with discernment and to walk in authority because we have an enemy who is doing everything that we can to keep us distracted, whether by trial or the trivial. And I want to urge us all not to get caught up in the current of our culture and the distractions of this life, but to live with a deep awareness of God and His work and activity on the earth. We need to correctly discern the times so we can find our place within them. We want to be able to look back on our lives and know we didn't miss it. So we are on the clock Let's live like it.